Picture this, an idyllic American suburb, white picket fences, manicured lawns, and families that look like they've stepped right out of a catalog. The wholesome facade of the Miller family was no different. Jim and Sarah, with their two bright-eyed children, Emily and Josh, seemed to have it all. Their house, a charming two-story colonial, was the envy of the neighborhood. But as everyone knows, appearances can be deceiving, and what lurked within the walls of their perfect home was a secret far more sinister than anyone could imagine. It all started subtly, objects moving on their own, a child's toy appearing in the hallway when it was supposed to be packed away, a whisper on the wind when no one was there. The Millers, practical and level-headed, brushed it off. Old houses creak, they'd say. The wind plays tricks. They had a logical explanation for everything. But the strange occurrences began to escalate, slowly and methodically, like a predator stalking its prey. The witching hour, midnight, became the family's shared nightmare. Every night, as the clock struck 12, the house would come alive, not with the groans of settling wood, but with something deliberate, something intelligent. It started with the television. It would flicker on by itself, always to a channel of static, the white noise filling the silent house with a sound like a million hushed, angry voices. The first few times, Jim would just unplug it, but then, it started happening even when unplugged. A faint glow would emanate from the dark screen, the static a ghostly whisper that seemed to call their names. Then came the footsteps, heavy, deliberate thuds from the attic, pacing back and forth. Night after night, Jim, armed with a flashlight and a baseball bat, would cautiously climb the pool downstairs, his heart pounding in his chest. He'd swing open the attic door, flooding the dusty space with light, only to find it completely empty. Not a single thing was out of place. Yet, the moment he was back in bed, the pacing would resume, a relentless heavy tread right above their heads. The children were the first to see it. Emily, the youngest, started talking to a new imaginary friend she called the Shadow Man. At first, Sarah thought it was cute, a normal part of a child's development, but Emily's descriptions became more and more unsettling. The Shadow Man is tall, she'd say, and he has no face. He likes to watch us from the corners. Josh, a few years older, started waking up screaming, claiming a dark figure was standing at the foot of his bed, just watching him, its presence a suffocating weight in the room. Sarah tried to comfort them, but a cold dread was beginning to settle in her own heart. She, too, had caught glimpses of movement out of the corner of her Arja, tall, slender shadow darting through a doorway or melting into the darkness of the hallway. She started feeling a constant chill, a perpetual sense of being watched, even in the brightest daylight. The warm, loving atmosphere of their home had been replaced by a palpable tension, a thick, cold fear that clung to the very air they breathed. One night the terror reached a new peak. At exactly midnight, every clock in the house stopped simultaneously. The grandfather clock in the foyer, the digital displays on the microwave and oven, even their wristwatches all frozen at 12 o'clock. In the dead silence that followed, a single clear sound echoed from the living room. It was the sound of a music box, one that had belonged to Sarah's grandmother and had been broken for years. Its delicate, haunting melody tinkled through the house, a lullaby from a bygone era now twisted into a terrifying omen. Gathering their courage, Jim and Sarah crept downstairs. The music box sat on the mantelpiece, its lid wide open, the tiny ballerina inside spinning gracefully. As they stared, mesmerized and terrified, the music slowly warped, the notes bending and souring until the melody was a discordant, screeching mess. Then, just as suddenly as it began, it stopped. The silence that rushed back in was somehow even more terrifying. It was then they saw the writing on the wall. Scrawled in what looked like ash or soot above the fireplace were two words: "Get out." The message was clear, a direct threat. This was no longer just strange occurrences. This was a declaration of war from whatever entity had taken root in their home. The family's denial shattered completely, replaced by pure, unadulterated fear. They called in paranormal investigators, a priest, anyone they thought could help. The investigators' equipment went haywire the moment they stepped inside. EMF meters screamed, temperature gauges plummeted, and their audio recorders captured disembodied voices whispering threats and pleas. The priest attempted a blessing, but as he recited the prayers, a violent force threw him back against a wall. And the heavy family Bible flew across the room, its pages tearing out and scattering like dead leaves. Every attempt to cleanse the house only seemed to enrage the presence further. The entity now focused its torment on Sarah. It would whisper her name when she was alone, imitating Jim's voice to lure her into empty rooms. Doors would slam shut, trapping her in closets or the basement. The darkness pressing in as she heard scratching from the other side. She saw the full figure of the shadow man more and more, often a towering, featureless silhouette of pure darkness that seemed to drain all light and warmth from its vicinity. It didn't need a face to convey its malevolence. Its very presence was a monument to hatred. The breaking point came during a family dinner. They were trying to maintain some semblance of normalcy, a futile attempt to reclaim their lives. As they sat around the table, the lights began to flicker violently. The temperature dropped so fast, their breath plumed in the air. A low growl seemed to emanate from the walls around them. Then, the dining room chairs, with them still in them, were violently shoved back from the table. Plates and glasses flew from their places, shattering against the walls. Above the chaos, Emily pointed towards the corner of the room, her face a mask of terror. "The shadow man is angry," she whimpered. In that corner, the darkness seemed to coalesce, to deepen, taking on the unmistakable form of the tall, faceless figure. It was more solid, more real than ever before. It took a slow step forward, its form rippling, and an unholy, guttural roar filled the house, shaking it to its very foundations. That was it. There was no more fighting, no more investigating. In that moment, Jim knew they had to leave. He grabbed the kids, Sarah grabbed her purse, and they ran. They didn't pack. They didn't look back. They sprinted out of the front door and into the street, leaving everything they owned behind. They piled into their car and drove, not stopping until the sun came up and the familiar silhouette of their dream home had long since vanished in the rearview mirror. The Miller house still stands in that idyllic suburb. It looks the same from the outside, charming, inviting, but it remains empty. No one has lived there for more than a few weeks since the Millers fled. Neighbors report strange lights and sounds coming from the house, especially around midnight. Sometimes, they say, if you look closely at the upstairs windows, you can see a tall, dark figure standing there, motionless, as if it's waiting for the next family to welcome home. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next dive into the darkness. Stay safe out there.